Hi guys. So, new to airbrushing are ya? That's okay. Or maybe you're looking at buying one but have doubts about how to use one. Well, that's okay too. I'm here to show you how easy it is. First of all, this is my daily. It's cheap, as in less than £20, but it's more than enough for what we do as railway modelers. It's got a 7cc ink cup. That's 7 cubic centilitres, or 7 millilitres. It doesn't sound like much, but that's quite a lot of room. So much that I actually mix my paints in the cup. And it's dual action. This essentially means that the trigger works on 2 axes. Pushing down will control how much air goes through the brush, and then pulling back controls how much paint goes through the brush. This gives you full control of your spray, ideal for smaller models and weathering. So, you have your gun. But you need something to power it. The compressor is an easy bit of kit to use. It plugs into the mains, and flicking a switch on will kick it into life. You can see on the dial that it's building up power, and it'll keep going until it hits the pressure that you've set. Moving on to the spray booth, and this is what I typically keep on one side. At the back is a little box where I tip waste liquids into. In the middle is a cup of clean water, and at the front is a little airbrush spray tank. The idea with these is that you can spray into it whilst cleaning the airbrush out, but I basically just use it as a holder, and that's it. And the spray booth itself. There are plenty of companies that make these, and they all seem to be pretty much the same thing. They have a big extractor fan at the back, and a fold-out booth at the front. So as you spray inside it, the fan will suck out any particles floating in the air. They also come with a couple of filters that fit at the back, but I've actually removed them, as you can see here, because I have the ducting bolted to the back. Again, you'll see this advertised, and I strongly urge you go for it. This goes up and out of the window, and without the filter pads, the extractor fan is working at full potential, sucking out the fumes and particles through the booth. So that's my kit set up ready. And the model I'll be spraying today is the 009 Worsley Works Talathin Coach number 19. It's already been primed, and I'll be applying the base coat. The Talathin Railways coach livery is red panels with brown woodwork. It's the red that I'll be applying today, and the best match I've found is Humbrol Gloss number 220. This is an enamel, so I'll be using enamel thinners to prepare it for the airbrush. The paint needs to be mixed, so the first thing I need to do is take a cocktail stick from the Crab. He's new around here and just likes holding things for me. When left on the shelf or in a drawer for a while, enamel paint separates, with the pigments falling to the bottom of the tin. So I'll give the paint a good mix. You can see how thick this paint is in its primal form. It's really thick, and it would never flow through the airbrush as it is. I've mentioned that I mix it in the cup, so I'll use the cocktail stick to add a few drops, well, if you can call them drops, into the cup. This is Valejo Airbrush Enamel Thinner. No idea where the label's gone, you'll just have to trust me on that. I do get asked what ratio I mix at, but I find it varies between paints, so I tend to eyeball it to get the correct viscosity. If it's too thin, it will look diluted, and as such, the model will need way more coats to cover it. If it's too thick, it just won't spray. It can take some practice to find the sweet spot here, but you'll get there. Also, don't try to mix paints with cocktail sticks like I did here. That was a dull move. You can see that I decided that the original few drops of thinners wasn't quite enough, so I'm adding a little bit more. And even a little bit more still. But the paint is looking more fluid now, so I think we're somewhere near. Before going anywhere near the model with the paint, I try a few test sprays. First off, the paint is passing through the airbrush, but it just seems a bit too thick. So I'll add a little bit more thinners and mix it in. Okay, great, so the paint is now spraying in a nice clean line, whereas before you can see it was sputtering, seen on a kitchen roll as little spots around the spray point, which was telling me it was too thick. With that looking good, I'll move on to the model. And I will say that, yes, I should be wearing gloves, but I currently don't have any. You should be wearing gloves. Basic spraying strategies apply with miniature painting, so spray over the model in nice consistent passes. When doing this, start spraying before the airbrush gets to the model and continue spraying until you fully pass over it and off the edge. This is because the airbrush can spit when it's finishing and starting, and if that happens, it won't hit the model. I've started at the bottom and I'm working up towards the top of the coach, using a wide consistent pass. That's the first slightly thin coat on, and I've noticed that the paint isn't quite hitting the model around the raised areas, so I'll pass over the model once again, but this time from different angles. So the airbrush was set up, the paint prepared, and the model sprayed. Now comes the rubbish bit, the cleanup. This is the most important thing to get right, because if you don't clean the airbrush well enough, it just won't work, which will lead to a bad afternoon for you. I'll start by taking a little piece of kitchen roll and wipe away as much as I can from inside the cup. Then I'll come in with the enamel thinners and add a bit into it. This will now act like a magic cleanup potion. Putting your finger in front of the airbrush will block the air's path and force it back up into the cup. You can see it bubbling through the paint, and the thinners will be washing paint back up from inside the airbrush. I'll then wipe the insides of the cup once again. If it's showing red, or whatever colour you sprayed, you then need to repeat the steps until it runs clear. Looking into the cup and the paint is still washing off the parts, so I'll use a brush to wipe away any that's stuck at the bottom. For good practice, I'm now spraying this, now very diluted paint, into the waste spray pot. Of course, because the extractor's on, I could just spray it straight into the back of the booth. A mix of covering the tip of the airbrush and spraying through normally will slowly wash away any paint left inside. One part that's always worth removing is the needle itself, as the paint will pass over this inside. To remove the needle, it's just a case of unscrewing the little nut at the back that holds it in place. The needle can then be wiped down. You're hopefully now getting a good idea of how much time you need to spend cleaning. I've been doing this for about 10 minutes now. The other area that needs a good clean is the nozzle at the front. Paint seems to build up here no matter what you do. With the needle still out the gun, I've dipped a cotton bud in thinners, and I'll just wipe it around the inside of the nozzle cover. Look at that, it's still turning red. Finally, after another 5 or 10 minutes of cleaning, the thinner is running clear, so I've got all that red out. When you're done, turn the compressor off and keep holding the trigger down to remove any pressure from it. Well, that's the standard quick clean after every spray session, but sometimes it's just not enough. Once a month, I like to do a full deep clean to get the airbrush running like the day I bought it. The easiest way to do this is to break the gun down into its basic components. You may find this daunting the first few times, but the airbrush would have come with a figure to show you what goes where, and you'll quickly become familiar with the parts. The other point here is that you don't really need tools. Everything just unscrews. You can see that I have a pot, and I'll put all the parts in there that I've removed from the gun. The fiddliest part is the nozzle at the front. The airbrush would have most likely come with a small spanner to loosen this, but mine's only finger tight, as tightening too much may break it. It will also have a teeny tiny washer at the back, so don't lose that piece. The pot of parts now gets topped up with thinners, and that includes the body of the airbrush as well, and I leave that to soak. It's now a case of going in and cleaning the parts with whatever thing you have to hand that fits. I find that cotton buds work well on the body like this. What's interesting is that you can see that the paint coming out isn't just the red from the recent spray session, but many colours. That's showing that the paint just keeps building up inside the gun, which will begin to affect the spraying quality. The little components have been sitting in thinners for about 10 minutes whilst I've cleaned the body of the gun, so I'll pick them out one by one and clean them individually. Some parts, such as the spring, don't really get that dirty, but whilst you're at it, it would be daft not to give them a wipe. I find rolling it on kitchen roll will clean it up nicely. The next part sits behind the trigger and is made up of two separate pieces, which need to move freely. Built up paint will stop that happening, so a cotton bud loaded with thinners will get into the areas which you'll struggle to clean with kitchen roll. And that goes for the trigger itself as well. This also needs to be free moving. In fact, this is the part that usually tells me it's time to clean the gun before anything else. As the paint builds up on this piece, it will jam down, meaning you can't actually stop it spraying once it's started. Enamel thinners work so well when it's used like this, and it really doesn't take much elbow grease to get these parts looking new again. The most difficult part to clean is the nozzle. It's so small. It's too small, in fact, to get anything inside it apart from the needle itself. Now I'm trying a cocktail stick here, but you really need to be careful not to snap the tip off inside the nozzle. And yes, I've done that on a previous airbrush. Really, the best way to clean this piece is with the quick clean, and spraying thinners through it a good amount of times. And finally, the outside of the body gets a rub down with a piece of kitchen roll soaked in thinners. Yes, this doesn't actually make it work better, but it definitely looks better, and that counts for something in my books. There are areas on the body where the paint manages to stick, so a cotton bud will dig into these little hidey places. Right, everything's clean now, so the gun can be reassembled. Like I said before, you get used to doing this, and there's only really a handful of pieces, so you can't go that wrong. That's about it. Hopefully that's all nice and clear for you, and enough to convince you to take the plunge and try an airbrush if you haven't yet. The upgrade to the model's finish over hand brushing is incredible, and probably the one thing that makes the biggest improvement. One last comment here. This was all enamel based. If you're using acrylic, it's all the same techniques, but you'd use water instead of thinners. That's about it. So thanks for watching. I'm hoping to keep adding to this Modelling 101 series every so often with more modelling black arts, which I hope to give you more confidence trying new techniques. Cheers.